Round of introduction. I'm here. My name is Riya Sinha, and I'm here with my colleague Priyanshi. And I have been kind of working in the development space for almost 15 years now. My background is in economics. I have a PhD in sustainable finance. And in ISDM, in the Indian School of Development Management, for almost 4 years now. And maybe, it will be very happy because we have very less, people who have joined in. So it will be great if you can just introduce yourselves and the name of your organization, your name and the name of your organization in the chat. And at the same time, maybe I will also request Priyanshi to introduce herself, and then we can deep dive into the topic. Priyanshi, maybe you request you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Riya. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming for this session on a Saturday as well. My name is Priyanshi, and I am a senior associate at Center for Innovative Finance and Social Impact at Indian School of Development Management. My work here is to do research on innovative finance in India. I have worked on the instruments part of it, some of which we'll be presenting today, and I also looked after the outcomes readiness pieces at the center. We'll give you a glimpse of both in today's session, so I hope you enjoy the session. Maybe before we move to the participants, maybe Sanjana can also introduce herself.
Sure. Yeah. Like I'm hoping Sanjana is already known to people, but yeah, please go ahead, Sanjana.
Hi, so my name is Sanjana and I also work with Indian School of Development Management in capacity of outreach manager. So I get to organize all these programs for people to get to know us better and to know about the sector better. And that's why we create different avenues so that we can share what's what's new happening in the sector and how people can see their careers within the sector if they are looking to upgrade it or to uh, look at the long term and they see any valuable insight to navigate the sector better in a specific niche. So today we are talking about innovative finance, but we talk about other topics as well. Every month we bring out one masterclass and try to reach out to more and more professionals within the sector. And today, most of the audience are the social sector professionals, early professionals or mid-career professionals. That's the kind of audience. There are some seniors as well because the topic is very specific and it's upcoming in the sector, so people should know about what's happening in this particular space as well. So these are the kind of people we will have today in the session, and I humbly welcome both Priya and Priyanshi also to take time after this uh, Diwali week and bring this innovative masterclass for all of you. So, handing over to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjana. So what I will do is, before, moving into the depths of what innovative finance is, what work we have been doing in innovative finance, maybe I can just talk a bit more about the centers which we have at ISDM. And where, this particular center of excellence, which is the Center for Innovative Finance and Social Impact, is basically rooted. So ISDM, as you might all know, it is Indian School of Development Management. We create development managers who are very much equipped with skills, talent to work in the social sector. So basically, we have three major verticals at ISDM, which are to create knowledge, influence the practice, and create the talent for social sector organizations. So we have the Global Knowledge Hub, which is the major knowledge creation center at ISDM, and we are all part of the Global Knowledge Hub, which actually does the research, which thinks about what are the ways to influence the practices of the various social sector stakeholders in the particular sector, and how create a broader outreach and dissemination of our knowledge products. I will come to the specifics of GKH, but before that, there are other two major verticals. at ISDM. The second vertical at ISDM is the strategic capacity building, which basically takes the knowledge products of the Global Knowledge Hub and creates them into, into capacity building modules, which are then taken up in the sector to influence the practices, be it, the Women on Boards program. So all kinds of programs which we have at the strategic capacity building unit, they kind of build the capacities of the junior to mid-career to leadership professionals in the sector. And then we have the postgraduate program in development management, which is run by the academic unit. The academic unit at ISDM basically runs this 1-year development management program. And whatever, research or practice modules which we are creating, they are all kind of taken into the academic vertical and created into necessary, academic material for the this particular vertical. So now these are majorly the 3 verticals or hubs which exist at ISDM. Now coming to the major, knowledge creation vertical, which is the Global Knowledge Hub, it has its centers of excellences, which is basically the one center of excellence is where I and Priyanshi belong to, which is the Center for Innovative Finance and Social Impact. We have a Center of Excellence on Philanthropy for Inclusive Development. We have a Center on Data Sciences, Center of Excellence on Data Sciences, which is based out of Bangalore. We also have a Knowledge Institute. So these 4, they basically make up the Global Knowledge Hub of this this particular vertical. And the purpose of the Global Knowledge Hub, as I said, is to bring out all types of research which is related to very specific elements of innovative finance or philanthropy or data sciences. We create the knowledge, we collate the knowledge from various sources. Of course, that requires a lot of intense literature review, through primary and secondary data collection. We try to bring in all the assets and resources. Not only create knowledge, but we try to influence the practices of the social sector organizations. So application of this knowledge is also one of the major targets of the Global Knowledge Hub. And then finally, the dissemination of the knowledge products as public goods. So whatever we create, we produce it under, we produce it under common licensing, which is CCL4, so that, the social sector entities, they have access to all the knowledge products which we are bringing out. So everything is produced under CCL4. It's, everything is applicable as a public good, and any like-minded individual who is aligned towards the social sector can take the resources and go through them. So this is the major structure of the Global Knowledge Hub. Maybe Priyanshi, you can move to the next slide. Now, as I said, coming to the very specific, Center of Excellence on Innovative Finance. So majorly, this particular, this particular unit, this particular Center of Excellence which we have, it aims to create or enable more, private capital to flow into the social sector, because we all know that there is a dearth of capital into the social sector. There are limitations, restrictions on the traditional finding, and hence there is a need to bring in more private capital, and not only bringing in more private capital, but bringing in private capital through innovative means for all kinds of social sector organizations, be it small, medium, or large. We definitely know that there are many NPOs out there who operate on a very small operating budget. So of course, as a center, our agenda is, or our vision is also to cater to those small and medium-sized organizations, and we intend to do that by creating knowledge on how to enable more private capital to flow into the sector. So majorly trying to address the availability of private capital, at the same time addressing the accessibility of private capital, on to what extent these organizations can get access to the private capital. So that's the larger vision of this particular center. We have three specific objectives. The first objective is also is of course to enable the social purpose organizations to better utilize the innovative forms of financing to leverage more private capital for their funding needs. We do that through various ways. Of course, as I said, knowledge creation is a part of this particular center, and also thinking about how that knowledge can be taken to the social purpose organizations, be it in the form of toolkits, be it in the form of cases, whichever way of bringing that particular or taking the particular knowledge to the sector people. The second objective is enabling the social purpose organizations and funders to better assess their true impact. And basically, this true impact is something which are there have been a lot of debates on what actually is true impact, whether that impact or the way impact is showcased by these organizations to funders, is it the right form of impact which they are actually driving on ground through the various interventions, because the understanding of impact is also shaped largely by the funders. So we want to also create this narrative shift where we are saying that we need to focus, or we need to basically assess or understand what true impact means for these organizations, and then take that towards to the funders, the different kinds of funders, maybe CSR, maybe HNIs, maybe foundations. So that's the second objective of the center, of how to enable the social purpose organizations to assess their true impact. What is meant by true impact? How do we measure true impact? Because the impact assessment frameworks which we have now, they are largely funder dominated, and the discussions, the KPIs, everything which have been created through these frameworks are largely dominated through the funder mindset. The third objective of the center is, of course, to build the communities of research and practice, and largely to create talent. And for that, we want to build the communities of research and practice. And the ultimate motive is, whatever we are creating through these center, it ultimately it has to contribute to the fundamental principles and practices of development management as a domain. So whatever you see on the screen, we will be talking about these products in some time. Priyanshi will be taking us through the different kinds of products which we have created in order to fulfill these objectives. But for now, I will restrict the particular understanding to the vision and the objectives of this particular center. This center started 2.5 years back, and since then it has been quite a good amount of understanding into understanding what actually means or what is the landscape of innovative finance, who are the key stakeholders in innovative finance in this whole ecosystem, because it's a very broad ecosystem. We have the different categories of the grantee organizations. We have, again, the social enterprises who have a very solid revenue model, who are making profits, but definitely they have a social purpose. Then we have the funders side, where there are foundations, there are HNIs, there's CSR capital, we have the philanthropic collaboratives, we have the funding platforms. So it is a very huge kind of a ecosystem, which we have tried to understand through our landscape assessment. And since then, we have been trying to focus on the various innovative finance approaches, which are not only applicable to the larger not-for-profit organizations, but also applicable to the small and medium sized organizations as a center objective, because for the larger organizations it is easier for them to fundraise because they already have their established networks, they already know the funders, they already have their specific units or departments of fundraising. But for the smaller organizations, it is always a funding challenge. It is always a very big challenge in order to develop these kinds of departments, or to measure their impacts through the impact assessment frameworks. So a large amount of the research presently, which is being practiced in this, or which is being curated in this particular center, is to help the smaller to the medium-sized organizations, which are less than 10 crores of operating budget. So that's the center's mission, I would say, as of now. Priyansh, you can move on to the next slide. Okay. In the meanwhile, you can also post questions, in the chat box. We'll try to answer to the extent possible, so that we can have, a conversational this thing across the 1.5 hours that we will be, spending together. So coming now to the need for innovative finance, of course, we all know that the primary or the major pool of funds is public funds, which is there in the sector. 5%, 4 to 5% is the philanthropy capital through institutional philanthropy and CSR, which comes into the sector. So the challenge is how to increase the 4 to 5%, first of all. Secondly, how to, using the same pool of capital, how we can bring in or unlock more pools of private capital. So definitely the challenge is manifold, basically, but we are focusing right now on two specific challenges. We have our SDGs, which needs to be fulfilled. There's a huge focus on the social sectors, the different aspects of the social sectors. So there have been discussions around the globe on various ways to bring in private capital. However, we also know that every specific sector, be it climate, be it climate mitigation adaptation, be it this health, education, livelihoods, all these sectors, they have very unique characteristics and require patient capital. So definitely the need of capital is different, and hence the role of innovative finance also becomes very specific and very technical when it comes to the different approaches, when it comes to funding the different sectors and themes. Of course, we do have sectors and themes for example, organizations working in the rights space. So what kind of capital, capital will suit their purposes? Is it only grants which can suit their purpose, or there are other ways to bring in more forms of private capital into the space, are the points of discussion. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So this is all something which is very much known to us. There are a lot of constraints of philanthropy funding. It depends on the benevolence of individuals, foundations, the various corporations. Philanthropy funding is, of course, for a very limited period of time. There is not always a continued interest of the philanthropist to continue the funding. There's a lot of vulnerability when it comes to very specific sectors, because philanthropists, they are very much driven by their own causes, by their own interests, by their own motivations and values. So definitely that has a specific set of limitations. Philanthropists might have a different orientation. Their understanding of impact in the space might be very different. We have the new generation of philanthropists who think about impact in a certain manner. We have the intergeneration philanthropists who have been conducting philanthropy investments for generations after generations. They have a certain kind of interest. So there are larger, constraints of traditional funding. Government funding, as we know, that's limited in the sense that, of course, it's limited to the budgets, and that is also, it is very much aligned to the necessities or the priorities of the government. CSR funding, it is mandated to 2% net profits. Again, CSR funding cannot be, provided to all specific sectors, very much compliance driven, very much based on, outputs, which is a major challenge in the social sector, because in social sector, output driven, funding is challenging, because the ultimate impact on ground is cannot be defined only by outputs, and there is a need for moving towards not only from outputs to outcomes, but also to a larger philosophical way of looking at impact, because that's how impact, or that's how the founders of these organizations would also want to see those intangible benefits. Of course, CSR funding, we all know, if you see the trends, that it is restricted to certain geographical areas, and geographical areas which are very closer to their business operations. That happens with philanthropy funding also. So with these constraints of traditional funding, what are some of though the sources of funding remain very much specific to these three, but what kind of approaches can basically unlock more private capital into the sector with the help of these sources of fund, is where we are trying to focus our research on. Now, I will request Priyanshi to take you through the different kinds of innovative finance, the approaches of innovative finance, and the various instruments which we have been kind of reviewing and trying to develop our own insights from them. Over to you, Priyanshi.
Thanks, Ria. So based on the context setting that's done by Ria on what's the need for innovative finance. Now, if you see the word, innovative finance basically means anything new in the form, in the way financing is done for the social sector. We would want to consider it as innovative finances. But to give it some, specific structure, we have tried to put some characteristics down of what innovative finance could look like. One very important aspect or a characteristic of innovative finance is it's complementary to traditional sources of finance. So a lot of times we get questions like, do you think blended finance is the only way future? Of course not. The whole idea is to support the current mechanisms of funding and not to replace them, because all of these are very, as you'll also see further in this masterclass, all of these new forms of financing, these are also very use case based, may not apply universally to all. So, it's very important to, I think, first remember and keep that in mind, that it's complementary to traditional sources of finance. The idea is not to replace traditional finance, but to support areas where the traditional finance is falling short. Second is, of course, it should reduce the time cost of implementation, basically make implementation more effective. If it's not doing that, if it's raising the cost, if it's proving to be a burden for implementation, then what's even the point of bringing in newer forms of financing that are like that, right? Next is it should help generate new financial flows or innovative channels or delivery mechanisms. What this means basically is it should not repurpose existing capital. It should not divert funds from existing places to other causes. Then some causes will lose out on better implementation or impact. But the idea is to create new financial flows and to unlock more capital for the whole system as a whole. Next is additional focus on unlocking additional funds from private sector. Of course, like Ria said, government funding accounts for about 95% of social sector spending. So the idea is to bring in more private sector funds to complement the government and traditional philanthropic fund. And of course, these models should be scalable and replicable across. Now, when we were writing down these characteristics through what exists in the ecosystem, we also realized these are very donor-driven perspective. What is currently missing from this is what is the use case for nonprofits, or how does it help ensure that it's equitably distributed amongst the nonprofit ecosystem and the communities as well. So that's the problem from where we started. Moving on, when we look at the current forms of innovative finance in India, we could categorize them into these 4 categories. First is outcomes-based, second is risk-based, third is debt-based, and fourth is hybrid. Now, outcomes-based, as the word suggests, move from input or activity-driven funding to outcomes-based funding. And we'll deep dive into it a bit later. Just want to introduce the word here. basically when you are funding, currently funding is given for activities or inputs. You have line by line budget items that we'll do all these activities, and that is what we need funding for. And clearly we think of the outcomes of the program a bit later. Have these been achieved or not? Even if we keep focus on outcomes, we measure them, or we evaluate the success on outcomes much later, as in have the outcomes been achieved. In a lot of cases it could be yes, but it could also be no. So the whole idea of outcomes based financing is to say that we should move funding to and tie it to outcomes instead of activities. Risk based are your guarantees. So basically, if a social enterprise is looking for a loan, right? There may be issues like the gestation period may be longer. They may not have a very strong revenue model, so to say. So anyone who gives them a loan would want some sort of assurance that this is bankable, right? So in that case, guarantee-based instruments help a lot, where a third party acts as a guarantor to say, okay, even if you give a loan to a social enterprise, I guarantee that a part of it will be returned. Debt-based is how you restructure debt to better suit the needs of the social enterprise. For example, it could be, repayments could be done for a longer time, or the interest rate could be lower as compared to a market interest rate. And hybrid structures are flexible and customized financial structures. It could mix, equity and debt-based instruments together, basically to suit the context of the recipient organization. Moving on, we'll start with outcomes-based financing. And one of the most used outcomes-based financing structure in India is a impact bond. Now, for a moment, I don't want you to look at what's on the screen because it's a very complicated diagram. But just think of it like this. If there is a funder and there is a non-profit, they both agree that funding is tied to outcomes. I just said in outcomes-based financing, you are saying give us funding only if outcomes are achieved. Okay. Non-profit agrees to it, funder agrees to it. But what would be the biggest challenge that a non-profit would face around this? The challenge would be of a working capital. If funding is given only if outcomes are achieved, then non-profit would say, where do I get the working capital to implement this, right? So in that case, there could be a number of options. One is the non-profit looks at their own reserves or corpus. Now in India, that is very rarely possible, right? Non-profits do not have so much reserves that they could actually implement the program in its entirety with that funding, right? The second could be there is an agreement between a funder and a non-profit that you tie part of the funding to outcomes and the remaining part could be tied to output. So it's input, sorry. So it's like a partial agreement where they say, okay, let's tie 40% of your funding to outcomes. So in that case, there is some money, some funds, some resources to actually implement the program. Now, the third situation, and that is where an impact bond comes into place, is between a funder and a non-profit, they both then agree that a third party could come and provide a working capital. So in this case, what happens is there is a funder, there's a non-profit. They both agree that funding will be given when outcomes are achieved. To combat the problem of working capital, there is a third party that is involved to say, we will provide you the working capital. And when the outcomes are achieved, the funder, the original funder who was supposed to give funding on outcomes to the non-profit can reimburse the third party. So now if you see the structure on your screen, investor is that third party, outcome funder is your original funder, and service provider, we could call it implementing organization. So now it's easy to understand this structure where an investor, which is your third party, provides upfront funding to the implementing organization. Then a third party evaluator comes in, and if the outcomes are achieved, your outcome funder repays the original amount to the investor. Now, this is what the structure of an impact bond is in brief. I hope all of you understand it. What is the value that you see here? Again, like I said, a lot of times we are made to think of outcomes. Was this program successful? Even if all the activities were completed on time. A lot of non-profits and program managers are made to think, was this successful, right? In outcomes-based funding, what is happening is you're constantly evaluating your program against the targets and indicators that are set based on the outcomes. Okay, so there is a real-time learning that is happening based on the data and evidence that is generated. Secondly, it's not just self-reporting that we have achieved this, it's evaluated by an external evaluator if your outcomes are achieved. So it allows it allows nonprofits an opportunity to showcase verifiable results. Now, this impact bond space is still nascent in India. It's still evolving. The cost of implementing impact bonds are at the moment very high, but the since the value is so great for nonprofits and for funding community also, the cases that have been replicated over the years, they're trying to bring down the cost, and to some extent they have been possible. So the market, the impact bond space is still evolving, I would say.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, and then if it's better answered later, I can hold the question. You referred to the cost of raising such a bond,
Yeah.
which I'm assuming is driven by legal structures that need to be in place. Construction between three parties, effectively here. Um, what has been the amount that has actually been raised under this within India or elsewhere that you see? Because it feels very much like I'm demonstrating something and then I getting money effectively, which is not so dramatically different from anybody else, raising funds, because if I'm able to show true impact, I can continue to raise it. So this is all about raising funds for the next phase of your operation. Is that effectively where impact fund is the best usage?
uh Yes and no, I would say. So, it's not replication of a successful model. Of course, you are demonstrating your work through the previous work that you have done. But with replication, there is also some amount of risk or newness that is there. For example, if your program is successful in one geography and you want to replicate it into another geography, that brings its own risk of new cultural context and geographical context and local context, right? It could be if you have implemented a program with, let's say, 5,000 people in the community, are you able to do it for 50,000? So I think though there is demonstrated impact, the risk or the newness of it is also in the scale or where you are now implementing this. Does that help?
Right. No, I understand the concept very well. I think you explained it extremely well, and your charts are good. Where I'm trying to find is, why would I take a structure like this from a social purpose organization? Because effectively it is like saying, hey, listen, I'll complete this particular project or something to a certain point. Like you said, 5,000 people, I want to go up to 50. Once I've done that, demonstrated that the impact was good, I can then, obviously the first phase has to be funded by somebody who is the third party, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
or a grantor, etc. And then the money that I obtain, because clearly my working capital is already gone,
Yeah.
I'm using it for the next phase. So I'm trying to say one part of my achievement is paying for the next one. But this kind of a funding is then basically set up for a fund for where you are repeating stuff that is going to be available. Not necessarily repeating, but you are effectively trying to show that your results matter, they work, and then you go to the next one. And then we'll
Yeah.
ask for another impact funding, and so on and so forth, etc. So it's essentially being rewarded. Call it, I've been given an assurance that this money will come in so that I can use it elsewhere. Because once my working capital is already exhausted, there is no real purpose for the money, anyways, unless I'm doing another project. So for similar nature,
Yeah, it can
or
Yeah.
also be to
not
scale
necessarily
your
similar.
existing, intervention. Like if you are kind of piloting it in a, specific scale, you might try to assess an outcomes-based structure or get into a contract like that to scale your, already the impact
Right.
which you had demonstrated. So
So if I were to put it in a kind of a startup phase, you got the first family and friends kind of a contribution.
Yeah.
I've started. Then I'm going for a pre-series A where I'm showing, hey, listen, look at me. I've already done something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now you are effectively going to get the money, except for the fact that in this case, you would have had the prior conversation that, look, if I'm able to hit these
That's right.
objectives that we set up,
Yeah.
That's
okay.
right. Yeah. And in
Yeah.
fact, like as I think Pranshi has also mentioned, that outcomes-based financing is also not for all kinds of, organizations and not for all kinds of NPOs for that matter. So yeah,
Yeah.
demonstrated
I'm
impact is
assuming you
something.
will be giving us some examples as well, right? Of people who.
We did not put it as part of this masterclass because we just wanted to touch base on the concepts. But I think, Sanjana, can you facilitate sharing some of the reading material with the participants in this masterclass?
Sure, I will do that. I'll do that post session if that works.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have very, I would say, Arun, we have very limited examples. 6 to 7 outcomes or impact bonds have taken place in India, and definitely, like every, example has a lot of, insights which have been carried forward in the next structure or something like that. There have been differences in terms of how the impact bonds have operated. But yes, if you go through the reading materials, I'm very much sure that you are going to get an idea of how these impact bonds have been structured, who has come in as a risk taker or who has come in as an outcomes payer, what have been the added additional impact which has been created through this contract, which a traditional financing could not have created. So those kinds of understanding, there are plenty of examples out there, which we have also provided to Sanjana as examples or cases, which she can share with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to add on the scaling bit, actually outcomes-based instruments and impact bonds in particular, they're actually used at the stage of scaling because, to even the process is so rigorous. You need a very robust MEL for this. You need very robust data management systems for this. It's not easy for a startup or a very new organization to actually establish these systems and processes at first place. So these are for organizations who have reached certain level of maturity and are looking at scaling up not just their program interventions but also their organizations as well. So it goes both ways. It requires MEL, requires robust systems and processes, and it will also allow you some flexibility to build that. So I think it's not for very early stage non-profit, so to say.
Yeah, no, I understand. Thank you. I mean, I'm
Okay.
assuming this is essentially where it's a promise to pay you if you do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got
Yeah.
it.
And the promise is on verifiable results. And that is why you see it says party outcomes evaluator. It's not, a self-reporting system by a nonprofit where they say, okay, we have achieved this. It is verified by an external evaluator to showcase. And that also kind of builds trust and credibility within the ecosystem for this.
Yeah. I'm passing class 12 with grade A, then you'll get a phone. That kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next category of instruments are risk-based instruments. And like I had explained, for example, if a organization, if a social enterprise, so there are certain challenges that a social enterprise might face. The stage from starting to actually even breaking even could be the time for that could be longer than a regular enterprise or a business, right? Uh, the the technology that, for example, a new social enterprise is bringing in may not be that bankable or investable. So in that case, if such organizations, even with a very good social cause, go to a bank for a loan, they may not be seen as investable or bankable cases, right? So in this case, guarantees play a very important role. Now, again, there is a funder or an entity that grants loan, and there is a enterprise which is asking for a loan, which is requesting that loan for themselves. Now, if the system doesn't look very bankable, then a third party comes in as a guarantor. In a lot of cases, these guarantors are philanthropists, it's mostly philanthropic money where they say, okay, if there is, for example, in a partial guarantee, it's something like, if there is a 20%, if there is a default, we'll pay 20% of the loan back to you. Pari passu guarantee is if there are multiple lenders, then everyone will get equal amount of, if let's say there's a guarantee of 20% again, all investors will get 20% of their credit back. In the first loss default guarantee, it's like, if there are multiple defaults in the repayment cycle, then the first loss will be repaid by the guarantor. So these are like providing a layer or a cushioning to say that in case there is a loss, because social enterprise may not be at a stage where it may be able to repay your money, we act as a cushion and we allow more time for the social enterprise to actually be there to give to service the debt that has been taken. So this is the whole idea of risk-based instruments. Debt-based instruments actually focus on restructuring the debt a bit to suit the needs of the social enterprise. It could be, it could be lowering the interest rate, it could be increasing the time for repayments and so on. So debt-based instruments basically restructure the debt for the social enterprise based on how they require it to be. And these offer terms and conditions that are favorable to the social enterprise as compared to a regular market rate for this. Hybrid structures usually are like a mix of financing. So it could be equity and debt-based financing. It could be something like a returnable grant. So I'll just take the case of how returnable grant works. So as the word says, returnable grant, okay, so there's a funder who is funding the communities, and these are individuals who are, let's say, setting up micro businesses, micro enterprises, and so on. The first tranche of loan is given to them, and the obligation to repay is not legal, it's moral. So if the individual has the capacity to repay, they repay back. Otherwise, it's converted into a grant. So in this case, since the obligation is moral and not legal, what it allows the recipients to do is it structures the financial instrument in such a way, if the loan is recovered, then it sits in the pool and other individuals in need can be funded. If it's not returned, then it's treated as a grant. So here also the funders are usually philanthropic and from CSR funding and so on. Now, mezzanine financing and quasi-equity work slightly differently. Here, it's a mixture of equity and debt structures. For example, essentially a debt will be provided to a social enterprise, but the repayments would be tied to their performance. So in months where the social enterprise has performed well, the repayment amount would be higher. And in case they have not been able to generate their own revenues, the repayment would be based on that. So it's kind of, it's a debt instrument, but it works more like equity and on the performance of the social enterprise. Now, this is more like a 101 for you all on how innovative financing instruments actually look. If we look at the top line trends of innovative financing landscape in India as of now, there has been a growth in this market, especially in the blended finance space, where private capital and philanthropic capital is blended to create more, to unlock more capital and also higher impact. But one of the reasons for this growth, like I said, is because of increased interest from donors to make their investments more effective, in the sense, philanthropic grant, if it is used once, it's just gone. If there is opportunity to create a pool of funding that keeps coming back, that keeps revolving, I think that also, this is a new space in the Indian market itself. And that has been one of the reasons for growth of these type of instruments. Second is, though the trend says that most of the instruments still focus on financial returns as compared to social returns. So even, the causes are social, but the funders are still thinking from financial lens. It actually also raises certain questions about how we are balancing the true and to what extent are we allowing the trade-offs. This is a question we are still exploring what would be that sweet spot for financial returns versus social returns. And one of the key trends that in terms of instruments, if we look at what are some of the instruments that have worked really well, a structure like outcomes-based financing and impact bond, which becomes very complicated because of multiple parties involved. So you have two funders, you have one non-profit, you have an evaluator, you also have performance managers to look at if the outcomes are being achieved, if the project is on track, and so on. It becomes a very complicated structure, one, to start, and second, to implement. And it's very rigorous, and it's like monitoring on a day-to-day basis, which becomes very burdensome also for the non-profits. Now compare it to a simple instrument like a guarantee. Guarantee is a third party will come in if there is a default, right? So that's a very simple structure to make. So there is a preference for these simple structures. And this is also one of the reasons why has been a constant discussion on how do we simplify outcomes-based structures. Though there is value in looking at outcomes, but the complication and the cost around it is so high, at least today, that there is ongoing discussions on how we simplify this and make it less burdensome for people and the organizations who are a part of it. Yeah. Now, when we look at supply side challenges, basically look at what are some of the challenges that funders face in these innovative finance structures. One is lack of data, information, and clarity. Like I said, the market is very nascent as of now. There are very limited use cases that are available to take learnings from. Very few of them have actually been documented. Even if the transactions have happened, their documentation, the information around them has been very little to actually replicate them and take this forward. Second is inability to pool different forms of capital. How do we bring in, philanthropic capital, CSR capital, and private capital together, especially when the rules around all of these are also very different? Then, like I just said, complex structuring of financial instruments, very applicable to impact bonds in particular. Next is impact and attribution. A lot of times when there are multiple funders involved and multiple stakeholders involved in one instrument, then how do we say whose capital, or how do we attribute that impact to? One is the challenge from the funder side, like if there are multiple funders, there is a challenge of attribution there. And second, because the impact space, like Ria was also talking about, how are we talking about impact, how are we looking at impact? And in these innovative finance instruments, there's a tendency to also matricize and standardize a lot of these impact indicators, which is okay to some extent, but in the social sector space, it also loses out on some of the nuances that are qualitative in nature. So how do we bring all these together? Mindset challenges, again, very specific to, impact bonds and outcomes-based financing, because it makes you rethink about how you actually operate. For 20 years, if an organization has been working with, these are my activities, I need funding for this, suddenly how do you make a shift to that outcomes orientation and outcomes based space? That itself is a challenge. And then trust deficit between recipients and donors. There has to be a lot of effort through institutionalization to bridge this gap. So these are some of the challenges that we understood from the funder side. From the recipient side, especially non-profits, one was, complexity in establishing credibility and measurement systems. Then, even if there is focus on outcomes, most of the funding is programmatic, where the non-profits do not get an opportunity to do organization development work or to make their organizations more resilient. Questions around complexity of compliance and reporting as well. For example, if there are multiple funders funding the same project, then you have individual reporting requirements for each type of funders, then for that instrument also. So it just increases the administrative burden of the nonprofits. Concerns regarding public provisioning for welfare as well, and also questions on value addition. A lot of times this question is asked, and rightly so, if we are repurposing the existing capital or are we unlocking more capital? So if we are taking philanthropic capital away from existing, let's say, an educational initiative, a small organization deeply rooted in a community and so on. And we use it for blending private capital. We use it to give guarantee and so on. So is there merit in it? Till the time it's not creating any additional finance, then I think it's just diversion of funding. So how do we in that case understand one cause is better than another? So a lot of these challenges have come from the non-profit side, and rightly so, which make us think on uh, how do we take care of these things? How do we ensure that this funding that is there, it's not taking away funds from the current causes, but it's unlocking more capital and distributing it equitably uh, to all types of non-profits and communities, so to say. Now, from the for-profit social enterprises, I think one challenge that came up was scale limitation, that it takes longer for them to scale than a traditional business, right? And that's why all these instruments. But even then, in practice, the expectation is that they will scale immediately, which sometimes acts as a burden for them. Second is ambiguity in defining impact and subjective evaluation. So there are no special laws as such for social enterprises today. So in one of the when we were talking to one of the for-profit CEOs, they said that uh, though we have participated in some of the innovative financing instruments, the first question that we are asked is, why don't you go to a bank to get a loan? Because you have a revenue model. So if you think your work is so great, they should be able to give you funds, right? And then at the same time, when they go to philanthropists, the question that is asked to them is, why should we fund you? We will fund an organization that doesn't have a revenue model, right? Because we are a philanthropic organization. So being in the middle, they actually find it very difficult to convince both sides of the funders. So that is one story that came up from a for-profit to us. And then lack of incentives to serve bottom of pyramid. Basically, here the focus is on if there's a funder, they want you to scale immediately. They want you to showcase results immediately. So unless the instrument is designed to serve the most marginalized of the communities, it will not serve them. It will keep on excluding them, which is a challenge that a lot of social enterprises face because they actually exist for these causes. And then, of course, challenges posed by the CSR laws and lack of long-term financing. And at a lot of times, they're also asked for collaterals for getting these loans, which may not be possible for them. Um, when we think of how do we take innovative financing practices forward, of course, there is a need to unlock more private capital. There is a need to see how do we balance trade-offs between social returns and financial returns. There is a need to see that we are not repurposing the existing capital. But I think overall, what we have understood from this space is that we need to move the discourse from funder driven narratives to also bring in nonprofits and social enterprises to the same level to also contribute to the ongoing discourse, because otherwise then it all becomes about, okay, these are my returns, this is your program implementation. So if a lot of funding will come from for program implementation only, how do you develop organizational resilience that actually helps in delivering those results? So I think nonprofits and social enterprises need to be at the center of this discussion, and this is an effort that we as a center are also making consistently throughout. uh, Other than that, I just, because there was also a question on outcomes based financing and how do we use it, I also want you to introduce to our other piece of work that we did. So when we were studying impact bonds and outcomes, what it takes for a nonprofit to actually participate in these structures, uh, we just said it needs robust systems and processes. But when we dig further, to what extent of, what would make an organization outcomes ready, it's actually much more complicated than we thought. So if you look at this diagram here, and I'll just explain it in brief, there is a whole outcomes culture meaning, which you see at the center of the circle here. performance culture, learning culture, and innovation culture. Because your focus is on outcomes, you have to constantly see if your organization is able to achieve those outcomes. Learn from the data and see if you're not able to achieve your outcomes, then how do you do that? What is the course correction that needs to be done? And innovation culture, innovation doesn't mean that you implement a new program. Innovation means if you are looking at outcomes of your work, you're not able to achieve them. How do you bring innovation within that framework of outcomes to say, okay, if this is not working, this may. Okay, so there is this whole outcomes culture at the center of outcomes readiness. Uh, and then we say that there are good practices of an organization. So, like, nobody will contest you need a robust MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning practices. So, what is that extra thing, that plus thing that you need over and above a good MEL? It would be using MEL for your learning. It would be using MEL to strategize your next course. It would be using your data in real time to say, okay, this program is on track or this is not on track. And we have a whole list of organizational and program level capabilities. I will not go into the detail here of this, but we can definitely share learning material with you. And I also see a lot of non-profits in the audience section. So we, based on this framework, we have created a online tool uh, where you can assess yourself if your organization is outcomes ready or not. Uh, Being outcomes ready is not just for participating in impact bond, but it is also to constantly see if you're looking at the outcomes of your work and if you're looking at the vision and mission of your organization. So you can go to that tool. It's a survey. It's a long survey, but it's a survey where you just with multiple choice questions where you can tick mark on the option that applies to you the most. And towards the end, you get a report card. The idea of that report card is to show you on which segments, which are shown in the screen here, you're doing well, and which are the areas of improvement. So it will give you a scale rating like high, medium, or low. And based on that, the tool will automatically also direct you to some sources that you can refer based on your report card. So if you're interested, you can look at that tool, and I'll share the link of that tool here in the chat box. So this is a basic work that we have done on innovative finance. It's I hope you enjoyed learning about this, but also, Ria, should we take some questions on instruments here, if that's
Yes,
okay?
yes, absolutely. Yes.
So are there any questions on innovative finance maybe that we can take now? And then we will move on to the next segment, which is on social stock exchange.
Yeah, I see a question from Ra Foundation. You can unmute yourself and ask the question, please.
Hey, hi Riyad, hi Priyansha, Mankita. I have a quick question where, first of all, thank you for, facilitating this session for us. So basically, I'm keen to understand like how financiers decide on uh, what kind of design or, what kind of, I mean, I would use more of a commercial language, what kind of products to be or services uh, to be finances. So how do they take the decision? Is there any thought or is there any kind of a research that you guys have? So if in case, please do share the link. I would like to, know more. The second question that I had is like, are the like because I have often seen many of the nonprofit organizations, they lack capacity to design such innovative products, which can then, be offered to multiple like private philanthropic or the donors perspective or the private capital. Okay. So how should they go about on doing that? So these are the two questions that I have.
Okay, I can go ahead, but Pranshi, would you want to answer? Else, like I can.
Maybe you can start and I'll add on to it, Ria.
Okay, so to the first question, uh, we have a primer on innovative finance instruments, which basically talks about how, as an organization, any organization or an NPO needs to navigate the various instruments. So definitely you can look at the primer. It has it is applicable for all for-profit social enterprises and NPOs. As a matter of fact, the options of innovative financing, which is applicable to NPOs as of now, it's very limited, extremely limited, I would say, in terms of approaches or in terms of financial structures, it's extremely limited. But definitely, you can have a read of the different instruments in the primer. It is written in a way so that every single organization can understand and take a call of whether it's something which they would want to inquire further. This particular the tool which Priyanshi mentioned about outcomes readiness, it is for and for an organization to see whether they are outcomes ready, or what is their component of of them being as an organization of being outcomes ready, and then kind of think of any outcomes based structure for that matter, like a second or a third step. But before that, of course, it is a very leadership kind of a decision which needs to be taken. But before that, this outcomes readiness assessment can be taken by these organizations to get into the understanding of whether they are even outcomes ready there, as an organization, in terms of their overall organization culture, or in terms of the program interventions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know whether that answers your question. Pranshi, anything to add on this particular
Yeah,
question?
I'll add to it. Also looking at how do you decide who to finance or what causes to finance. I think when it comes to causes, a lot of funders have their own, they know what the causes they want to fund. So if someone wants to fund sustainable livelihoods, they'll fund that. They'll not look at education at all. That's their strategic choice, right? Second, on how do they decide if this organization is it should be a part of such financial instrument or not. In that case, as of today, there are some eligibility criteria that they look at. The first one for a for-profits case would be, something like, do they have the ability to service debt? Do they have strong business models? What is their business plans for the next some years? Okay, and things like that. Uh, for a non-profits case, it's if it's something like an outcomes-based program, they look at do they have a track record of successful programs? Do they have some form of results to show? It could be their own self-reporting or not. Do they have teams in place to actually execute these programs? Do they have their team structures and HR management practices? That so it's a long list of things that they see, and it also depends on funder to funder how they would want to go about it. As of today, there are no standard practices as to say, these are the 5 things that they look at. So these discussions also, because like I said, these transactions have happened so much in isolation and within the group of people that have been a part of it, that these discussions also organically evolve. But it has, we have tried to provide some structure to it, and that's what actually Ria is referring to in the primer. So for more details, you can definitely refer to the primer that we have. Your second question was on the capacity building. So definitely non-profits and even the social enterprises do not have the capacity for that. And actually, that was one of the reasons why a COE like SIPSI was also started, to basically look at what is happening in the sector and also collate some learning material for the sector as a whole. So though we started as a knowledge center where we bring in reports, primers, learning material, and so on, now we also actually do some workshops and master classes around it. And we are also in, whenever we go for discussions, even with funders, we always say that non-profits cannot do this alone. Like, it's an ecosystem that needs to support it. So if you want a stronger MEL, if you think that is important for it, so you also need to fund it. So these are some of the discussions that are ongoing, of course. In terms of non-profits not knowing it and then therefore not being able to decide if that's a good instrument for them or not. Like I said, again, currently most of these are funder dominated, but of course a good instrument would not place funder at the center. It would place a non-profit at the center. And even if they do not understand how this instrument looks like or the concepts around it, what they would definitely understand it if this is something that is uh, being created for them, what it would mean for them. Will they be able to deliver? So a lot of these involve a lot of discussions when implementing, and that is why these structures become so complicated and take a lot of time, at least now. So as the space evolves, there is a constant effort by organization like ours and also others in the ecosystem to kind of templatize some of these to the extent possible to enable all the nonprofits and the funders to actually have a starting point for themselves. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but a lot of these things are also seen as challenges today.
Well, thanks, Priyanshi, and thanks, Ria. To an extent, I got a better sense of, the question that I asked. So thank you so much for that.
I do see
Right.
Arun has a question. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is more a follow-up question in a way. And again, thanks again for a very illuminating conversation here. Um, you talked about, and I think the previous question talked about how do the social organizations get themselves ready for such innovative instruments, and potentially also how do the uh, funders find what they really are acquiring. Now, in the commercial side, commercial organizations, you have investment banks that actually play the in between. So, are there organizations in the ecosystem here that are playing that role to ready both the social organizations who are trying to get the funds and also act as the go between for financiers or donors or whatever, who so that they can find what they are looking for? So are there organizations that are playing that role? I mean, I know you talked about ISDM playing that role but you're really not a go between. You're more a facilitator or an ecosystem knowledge
Yeah.
creator, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So I can quickly remember, there are actually a lot of organizations. What I can quickly remember is if you have heard about the blended finance company, so it acts as an intermediary. These are basically intermediary organizations who
Mhm.
play kind of like facilitator or bridge between the investors and the investee, which can be NPOs and social enterprises, for-profit enterprises together. They also act as a bridge across, investors, philanthropists, and governments. So it's a new company. And there are actually companies like these, like intermediary companies like these, which kind of act as bridges. Right now, I can only recollect TBFC. Priyanshu, are there other examples where?
Yeah, so TBFC actually works more on blended finance. There are others like Dalberg also. So, they act as financial intermediaries. There's Dalberg, there is British Asian Trust, which specifically works on outcomes-based financing and impact bonds. There are also organizations that work on the non-profit side as intermediaries. For example, Atma. It helps nonprofits showcase. So in outcomes-based financing, you'll see some where nonprofits have to work on their outcomes cost or outcomes pricing. So it helps support nonprofits do that. So there is Atma as well. So I think more from the funder side, where how do you design these instruments? Dalberg has been very, very active in this, and the blended finance company is also a new player in this space.
Got it. So more if I'm hearing you right, it's essentially outside of the blended finance, which I don't know about. These are much more of the current consulting companies that are
Yeah.
extending.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Do we have more questions?
Also, I would like to add to the previous one, other than the consulting companies, a lot of foundations have financial experts with them. For example, MSDF is one where it's a foundation, but they design their own instruments with the help of financial intermediaries. So though they work with intermediaries, they also will have their own in-house experts sitting for the finance side of it.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Understood.
Should we move ahead, Ria, then?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
able to see the screen. Yeah. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah. Yeah, so I will not deep dive into the depths of it because I think it's known to most of us about the recent developments of the social stock exchange. It is just like any other platform housed in both the Bombay Stock Exchange and the NSE. These like there has been like a consultation paper which was floated around this year in January in order to, how to make the smaller not-for-profits much more capable of applying to the funds. So essentially, there are now hundreds of NPOs who are already registered on the stock exchange, but the number of NPOs who are actually, they are getting or they are kind of using it as a fundraising platform, the listed NPOs, those are very few, I think. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but around 10 to 12 NPOs, they have raised almost 22 to 23 crores of rupees through the social stock exchange. But now the larger discussions on the social stock exchange is majorly on how to make the overall ecosystem much more favorable for the smaller not-for-profits. For example, the social audits, which these organizations who like want to fundraise through the social stock exchange, they have to get social auditors in place, and they have to get their, the entire organization, their activities socially audited. So there are auditors who do this job. But now there are, kind of more developments in the space on how to make it much more equitable and accessible for the smaller not-for-profits. And so that, organizations who are very, like they are kind of startup organizations, they can also start to access the platform. But there are quite number of limitations over here. I wouldn't go to the legalities of the social stock exchange. Like they have all kinds of definitions of what is a not-for-profit, what is a for-profit social enterprises, which is an entity which can raise funds. So those kinds of things are already available on the internet, which you can definitely have a look. The major thing is the instruments through which the social stock exchange or these organizations, they raise funds through the social stock exchange. It is merely the one and only instrument which we have seen, which is the zero coupon, zero principal, which is basically a grant. It is nothing more than a grant. There have been a lot of discussions and deliberations going on in order to make much more familiar instruments, take examples or insights from the social stock exchanges which have been successful globally, and also kind of innovate on the structures so that the smaller organizations can also raise. There have been discussions. The consultation paper, it has brought out the minimum amount which can be like as an application size. It needs to be reduced from 10,000 to 1,000 again, so that the smaller organizations can apply. Nothing, I think, has been finalized yet. These are all deliberations which are going on in the domain. But also how to make this platform available to the retail investors, like having a secondary market for these, so that the other people can also, the retail investors can actually invest their money in it. There has been very limited traction on the retail part of it. Largely, the HNIs have been able to kind of provide or reroute their funds through the exchange, and organizations, mid to large sized organizations, actually have been able to cater to the funds. Yashi, we can move on to the next slides. Yeah, I wouldn't again go into the depths of this. These are all available on the website on how it is, because initially, there has been expansion of the NPO. What is meant by a NPO, or what expansion of the legal status of the NPOs, which NPOs can access funds to the enterprises. Those developments have already taken place. The major developments now are taking place in how to make the retail investment market larger, how to innovate more instruments apart from the ZCZP, and of course, how to make overall the social stock exchange much more eligible for the smaller organizations. Those are the discussions which are presently going on in the domain. You can move on the next slide. Yeah, I think I've already talked about this. Yeah, maybe the next slide. Again, as I said, that this is just a mere, grant-based mechanism, and there is definitely a lot of, I would say, a lot of space in this particular area to kind of have more instruments so that the smaller enterprises or the smaller not-for-profits, they are able to access the funds from the HNIs. Presently, CSR is not able, how do we make the CSR capital also available through these exchanges is also another deliberation, another discussion which I have heard around the corners. What role can the government play in order to reduce the risk of the investors in this? Can they offer guarantees? Can they offer subordinated debts? So those kinds of discussions also on through the exchange. Apart from this particular, funding platform, basically this is a funding platform. We have various other funding platforms as well. For example, a give.do or a returnable grant platform like Samhita. We have the crowdfunding platforms like Milap, Keto. These funding platforms also function in a similar manner to make the not-for-profits and the social enterprises eligible for the funding. But of course, there are a larger, set of challenges. CIFC, or this particular center, the Center for Innovative Finance, has been deep diving this year on a study on how to unlock more philanthropy capital through two channels. One is through the philanthropists themselves, by understanding their perception, their motivation, of bringing in private capital or what interests them in order to provide capital to the sector. What can be done in that space? Is storytelling a way of influencing them, sensitizing them? Those kinds of studies we have taken up, and we have also taken up the second route is through the funding platforms. What kind of challenges do these funding platforms face in order to channel the funds to the smaller small and medium-sized organizations, because those are the bigger pie of organizations in the overall, NGO sector in India. So what can be done to basically enable them to get more funds? So yeah, basically these are some of the studies which we are doing right now, and hopefully, this gives actually a kind of overall understanding of what we are doing in this, in the span of 2.5 years where the center has existed. These are all CIFC's publications in the last couple of years. We have tried to navigate both the financing space and the impact assessment space, because funding or financing and impact has to come together in order to enable access of funds from the funders to the NPOs. The funders are there to provide the funds, but what will basically enable them to give the funds to specific geography, specific themes, is something the center is working on. In order to, we had earlier worked with the Social Stock Exchange to create a platform, or channel or an eligibility portal where any organization, any NPO for that matter, or any social enterprise for that matter, can check their eligibility of whether they can access funds to the Social Stock Exchange, whether they are eligible for that. So that is also available on our website. Rest, as I said, the primer is available, on our website. The landscape assessment is available. A guide on impact investment is available on our website. In terms of what NPOs understand on outcomes-based financing, what is their perception of outcomes-based financing, was a primary study which we had taken with 80-odd organizations. So those, those kinds of reports, articles, we have also published quite a number of articles. We have published like we are in the process of publication of a case on one of the impact bonds. So Arun, when you talk about the impact bonds, you can also go through that case once we publish the case. It is a teaching case though. Those cases will be used for our postgraduate diploma program for the students of the PGDM program. But of course, it gives the specific nuances of what had enabled that kind of funding into the sector, assessing that funding from both an innovative finance lens, impact assessment kind of a lens, and overall, outcomes-based financing lens. So definitely that is also one of the ways we are trying more and more to navigate the space of small and medium enterprises, because medium organizations, for the sole reason that they are the larger part of the ecosystem, which gets left out when it comes to funding, when it comes to fundraising. But definitely there is no silver bullet. There's no one strategy which will be applicable for them to fundraise or get access to the innovative forms of financing. But first of all, what needs to be addressed is their levels of awareness, is their levels of sensitivity, and same applies to funders as well. As a center, we are trying to bridge the gap in terms of understanding the challenges of the smaller not-for-profits and taking those learnings to the funders. We are doing that through our impact work. We will be creating a framework on impact measurement, which is basically very much rooted into the principles of development management, which basically should make funding much more equitable and accessible to the various kinds of organizations out there. So yeah, bringing both of these two lenses in the innovative financing space is what we aim to do.